G'day, I'll be doing a series of videos on one project, that is this bowl, to cover a number of different concepts. So in videos to come you'll be seeing quite a bit of this particular bowl in different stages or along with other projects perhaps. In the rest of this video I'll be going back to the start and looking at some techniques in the making of a bowl and focusing in particular on how to use a bowl gouge. This is a drawing of the bowl that I'll be doing. It's a classic OG shape. So an OG shape is where a curve is going one way and towards the end it ducks back in the other direction. So there's the classic OG shape. So I'll be showing you how I do that. This is a cross section of the bowl, which means that this is my foot, which just looks like two blocks at the moment, but just picture it as an entire ring. The lines that I've got here are indicating the direction of the grain of my bowl blank. Over here the grain's going this way, like so, and that's very important because basically I'll be doing most of my finishing cuts in that direction, like so. In doing it that way I'm cutting with the grain. Grain is being supported by grain as I am cutting, and that will give me a far cleaner cut. But there are going to be some cuts along the way where I'm going to be cutting in the other direction, but the finishing cuts will be more this way. The other idea of this video is to show you basically the tool technique of my bowl gouge. Now this is the bowl gouge that I'm using. It is one of Woodcut Tools replaceable tip gouges. I've done a video on those before. This is my preferred bowl gouge. I really like this type of bowl gouge. So that's what I'm going to use. And I'll just move this up to this camera here, and there's the grind that I have got. It's a reasonably long grind along this way. I'll also have got my wooden bowl gouge, which I can refer to just to show you exactly where I'm cutting. So this is sort of just an enlarged version of this other bowl gouge. Now I initially am going to be cutting in this direction, or in this corner here. I attack the bowl at this corner here because this wood is so irregular. If I try and cut over here, for instance, there's a lot of irregularity to it, and there's a chance that the irregularity of the wood will bounce my tool around. So what I tend to do is attack the area of the least amount of irregularity, which is right on this corner here. And once I've got that rounded over, then I can start moving into other areas of irregularity. So I'm going to get the lathe going and get this project started, and I'll show you how I present the bowl gouge. Now basically, initially I'm going to be dropping the handle way down low, like so, on my bowl gouge, so that I can use this long edge. I'll get my pencil out again. I'm going to be using this long edge of the bowl gouge. Now to use that long edge without getting a catch, I am going to have to present that long edge to the rotation of the wood at approximately 45 degrees, and that is approximately it there. And when I do that, you'll notice that the shavings are these curly shavings, and you can see those curly shavings coming off. If I present that cutting edge, that long cutting edge, more like that to the bowl, it'll be all right initially, but you'll just notice that how much harder it is for me to turn that piece of wood when it's like that. And if that is the case, something will give, and usually the bowl gouge rolls in as it digs into the wood, and then there's a big catch as the tool rolls around, and ugly things happen. Now it could be just that the tool rolls around and gives you a bit of a fright, or it could be the wood comes off the lathe, which is an even worse scenario. So that's basically the technique that I'm going to use initially to rough this bowl down. I'm going to start by going slow and then speed the lathe up as we go. That's about as fast as I can go at the moment without the lathe wobbling around. You can notice where the handle is. Now the handle's got to be there to present this long cutting edge to the rotation of the wood at 45 degrees. Because that wood is so irregular, I'm not pushing hard into the wood, I'm pushing hard down onto the tool rest so that I don't get all this happening. So a lot of my effort at the moment is pushing the tool down into the tool rest. Because the wood is so irregular, it wants to bounce the tool around. So I'm letting the wood come onto the tool and not pushing the tool into the wood. Another problem I'm having would be overcome if I could actually speed the lathe up. So I've taken a little bit of wood off, so I might try and speed the lathe up. The other thing I can do is get the tool rest a lot closer. Speed the lathe up a little bit. You can see the angle of the cut that I'm making at the moment. I'm just cutting across this angle. Originally the bowl would have been this shape, and I'm cutting across that angle there at the moment. Sometimes it helps to wear a pair of gloves so you don't get splinters like that sticking into the side of your hand. So I'm still using that same cut that I explained at the very start. I'm actually cutting the wood because what I'm doing is I've got the bevel rubbing. So there's the bevel rubbing, and I'll just keep going a little bit further, but I can show you the direction that the wood is spinning. Now if I were to just grab a pencil and put a line there like so, that is going to indicate the direction of the rotation of the wood. And there is my, if I hold that up there like that, you can see that the cutting edge is being presented to the angle of rotation. There's the angle of rotation at approximately 45 degrees. Now if I were to trace that angle there, there it is there, and that's approximately 45 degrees in there. Now what I can do is I can even show you a little bit of a catch, I hope. So I'm going to do this by slowing the lathe down, and I'm going to present the tool like that, and you'll notice that there it is, there's a catch in slow motion. Now that was slow motion. There's the mark that was made just in here, and if that was a lathe or the wood spinning a lot faster, that would have been or given me a bit of a shock. Now I knew that was going to happen because I was presenting that long cutting edge not at 45 degrees to the wood, but perpendicular to the rotation like that, and it just dives in because you're trying to take off too much wood all at once. It dives into the grain, rotates the tool around, gives you a bit of a fright. So to overcome that, you've always got to present this long edge at 45 degrees to the rotation. As I said before, to do that, I've got to have the handle way down here like so. You can see that the handle itself is into the hip down here. I can turn that tool rest around a little bit to get closer to this section of wood here, and I'm still using that same cutting action. Once again, we can use that cutting action and slow the lathe down so that you can see it all in slow motion. There it is in slow motion. And you can see the shavings come off in a curly way. Now that's, you know you're doing things right when you get these curly shavings. But I don't want to go that slow because I find it too hard to control things. And I'm getting a bit of a wobbliness happening there, so I'm going to speed things up. Now what you'll also notice is that I'm cutting from here through that way, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm cutting with the grain. I've just got it going a bit too fast there, slow things down. Now if I actually come back this way, I'm not cutting with the grain anymore. I'm cutting against the grain. Now let's see if we can see a difference. And here's a very obvious difference between cutting with the grain here and cutting against the grain just there. So that's why it's so important to cut with the grain. But there comes a time where you find it difficult to actually present the tool at 45 degrees to the rotation. Whoops. Here for instance. Now one thing I'm finding is that this is getting in my way. I can't get that out of the way, except for I could do something like this. But there's the bevel rubbing. Cutting edge is presented to the angle of rotation at approximately 45 degrees. I'm still just doing roughing cuts. I'm establishing the diameter of my foot just here. And soon I'll be able to start actually doing the shaping. Now to do the shaping, remember my OG shape? I've got a lot of this established already pretty close, but now I've got to just get this curve going the other way. And that happens up in this area here. So I can start doing that now. I've just sped the lathe up a little bit. I can hear the lathe wobbling. I've got to back things off a bit. And I can put my curve in there like so. This cut is different because now I'm starting to cut further down towards the tip. So initially, let's go back to this wooden one. Initially I was cutting along this long edge here, but now to do that cut there I was cutting along here. So I was presenting the tool much like that. And in presenting the tool like that, look at where the flute is. If you can imagine a ruler along there, that ruler is at about 45 degrees to the floor, which means that that cutting edge is presented to the angle of rotation at about 45 degrees. So here we go. I'll just use that cutting edge again. And now I can start or go back to shaping the bowl. And there's my OG shape coming together nicely. My cuts aren't as severe now, they're not as big, because I'm getting closer and closer to the shape that I want. You can see that there's a lot of ridges happening here now. If you're getting a lot of ridges, one thing it tends to suggest is that you haven't got the bevel rubbing on your tool. So there's the bevel rubbing, and you notice that a lot of those ridges are going. But this cut that I'm using at the moment really is a roughing cut. It's not a finishing cut, and I'm going to have to do a finishing cut in a sec. Now I want to tidy up this surface here, and it's going to be very hard for me to present the tool like that at 45 degrees to the rotation. So I'm going to have to use, instead of this long edge here, I'm going to have to start working down close to the bottom of the flute. And that's how I'm going to cut, like so. Once again, if I put a ruler across the flat of that flute, then it's about 45 degrees to the floor, which means that the bottom cutting edge that I'm using is also at about 45 degrees to my rotation. Now this is where I want to take my foot to, so I'm going to use my bowl gouge like so. So I'm cutting right down on the bottom of the flute. Now this is where you can get into a bit of trouble, because you think you're cutting down on the bottom of the flute, and you are at first, but what happens when you get down to the bottom of that and into that corner, is you are suddenly cutting not only down on the bottom of the flute but across this edge here as well. And the bottom of the flute is cutting nicely at 45 degrees. Whoops, just slid off a bit there. But when you get down to that bottom, into that corner there, this edge of the bowl gouge starts to cut as well, and that's not at 45 degrees, and that's where you can get another catch. I'll just show you on my bigger piece. Initially I am cutting here as I go in, but then as I get further and further in, I'm not only cutting there but all across here. This bit's cutting at 45 degrees, but this bit isn't, and that's where you can get your catch. So you just got to watch that. What I often will do is just do a little bit of cutting there, and then I will use a skew chisel as a scraper, and I'm just going to speed the lathe up and go in there like so. Now that skew chisel is very, very sharp, and I'm able to look at those fluffy shavings. I know that I'm cutting well when I'm getting those. Now I'm just establishing the shape of my foot there. I'm happy with that, but now I've got to do some finishing cuts, because look, I've got all of this torn grain. Now you get a lot of torn grain and the end grain. Remember, my grain is going this way, so this is end grain here and end grain over this side as well, and look at all the torn grain there. So I need to get rid of that torn grain and this torn grain. It means that I've got to cut this way, where grain is being supported by grain. Now to do that, I've got to, it's a little bit more awkward. I've got to bring the bowl gouge around like this, and I've got to get the handle in a far more horizontal position, because I'm cutting down at the bottom of my flute, and it's more like that. Now it's very hard to get into that corner, but I'll have to deal with that later on. Now one of the problems is I haven't got my tool rest in the right spot, so I'm just going to make some adjustments there. That's much better. Now I've got the good tool rest support the whole cut, and what I'm going to try and do is get this cut all done in one hit. Now the OG, so I come duck back this way. When I'm doing this cut, just remember I am cutting down the bottom of the flute. I'll get my big bowl gouge out, so I'm cutting down here, but you'll notice that this edge here is very close to the wood. You've got to watch out for that. As soon as you get that in contact with the wood, that's when we have some nasty catches. That's when, and I'll just slow the lathe down, we don't want this sort of thing happening, getting, that's it there. Do you see that catch in slow motion? And we can just see it. Where does it go? I've lost it. There it is, just there. There's my catch. I'm not sure if the camera can pick that up, but look at how much cleaner that grain has cut, especially end grain here and end grain around here. We'll have another go. And taper off the cut towards the end there. Now what about this down here? Now I've got to come back the other way. I've got to cut against the grain to get into there. There's no way around it. I can't get right into that base there without, I can't get right into that corner there, I should say, because I run the risk of having a catch with the long edge catching on the spigot itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a skew chisel just as a scraper like so. So So it's flat on the tool rest, and there we have it. And I can even use this as a scraper like that to tidy that up. And with this wood, look at how clean that cuts, or scrapes I should say. I'm not going to sand this bowl in this video, so that's it for the shaping of the bowl at this stage. I'm going to have to flip it around, hold it in the jaws of the chuck along that tenon, and start taking out the inside.